Now in America, we have it so good where our oppression, according to the left, is where you don't call somebody by the correct name, or you don't call somebody by the correct pronoun, or you don't tell a biological female that they're an actual male, or you don't recognize their identity as a male because they're biologically a female. That's what oppression looks like today in America because we have it so good. But here in Cuba, if you speak out against your government, you're going to disappear. I mean, there's cases right now where people's family members just can't find their other family members that went out and protested. We know there's murders happening by going up against the government here in Cuba. So this is what happens when you have a quasi-socialist communist country out there that was supported once by Bernie Sanders. Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. Before we get into our story today, please take a moment right now to hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help support the channel, and it also allows us to grow here at the Bald Brad Show, so your help would be greatly appreciated. And with that being said, our story of the day is a continuation of the Cuban protest. We now have reports of media getting beaten in the streets by Cuban police officers. Now, I want to point out this is what true oppression looks like, and I don't want to say this hasn't happened in American history because it has, but Cuba doesn't have a First Amendment right, where here in America we do. But furthermore, now in America, we have it so good where our oppression, according to the left, is where you don't call somebody by the correct name, or you don't call somebody by the correct pronoun, or you don't tell a biological female that they're an actual male, or you don't recognize their identity as a male because they're biologically a female. That's what oppression looks like today in America because we have it so good. But here in Cuba, if you speak out against your government, you're going to disappear. I mean, there's cases right now where people's family members just can't find their other family members that went out and protested. We know there's murders happening by going up against the government here in Cuba. So this is what happens when you have a quasi-socialist communist country out there that was supported once by Bernie Sanders. But I digress because we'll get into that a little bit later. This comes from our friends over at the Daily Wire, and it is titled Communist Cuba, AP journals beaten, bloodied by police while covering freedom protests. The article starts off here by saying a photojournalist from the Associated Press, the AP, was beaten by officers in Communist Cuba while he covered the freedom protests this weekend. While capturing images of the protest against the regime from Havana, Ramon Espinosa was accosted by Cuban police officers on Sunday and left bloodied. Here's a little bit of what that looks like. Cubans took to the streets on Sunday to protest against the repressive communist regime demanding their freedom. And we have Senator Marco Rubio that spoke about the protests on Monday, emphasizing the failure of socialism and communism. And if you recall, Marco Rubio is a Cuban American. It says here from Marco Rubio, in 62 years of communist tyranny on the island of Cuba, we have never seen, there's never been, what now is up to 40 cities in which people took to the streets organically, unorganized, grassroots, to ask for the end of that tyranny, Rubio said. The first lesson we need to take away from it is that Marxism, socialism doesn't work, the senator asserted. The way socialism, the way Marxism has always worked, the way it has always empowered itself, it goes to the people and immediately divides them. It says there is an oppressor class and that there is this victim class and these evil oppressors, capitalists. In the case of socialism and traditional Marxism, they oppress their victims. And whenever you hear about socialism, you should start thinking AOC, you should start thinking Bernie Sanders when these things come to mind, because Bernie at one point supported Cuba, and I'll get to that in a moment here. Socialism and Marxism have done in Cuba what it has done everywhere in the world that it has been tried, Rubio stated. But remember, the left say, well, it hasn't actually been tried. It really hasn't been pushed. It really hasn't been touched the way that it was written and supposed to be. No, it's failed literally every single time. It's been done more than 100 times in 100 years. It's a complete failure. It turns entire places into atrocities. It's not a good thing, but yet our school systems, some people are still supporting this idea of socialism, like Bernie Sanders, like AOC, and other people in Congress. It has failed. It has failed. They gave up their freedom, or what they were told. Give up your freedom in exchange for a world-class healthcare system. It's not a world-class healthcare system. In fact, it's a healthcare system that does not even have the ability to deal with COVID at its very basic level. And that's one of the many reasons, again, one of the many reasons why these protesters are going out into the streets is because of the handling of COVID-19, amongst other things like the economy, like the repressive government, so on and so forth. Rubio continues, the Cuban government says give up your freedom for economic security. What economic security? People are hungry, homes are crumbling. crumbling. There is no economy. There's no real economy in Cuba. Give up your freedom and you'll have an education. Free education for everybody. That education, number one, you're a doctor. You could drive a taxi cab in Cuba and make more money. Or number two, you can get forced to go overseas and work basically on slave wages, no pay, barely any at all. And this is the type of stuff that you had Bernie Sanders touting when he said, oh, well, Fidel Castro, when he came in, he let people learn how to read, people are being educated, and he talked a little bit about how great the country is. So we have another article here by the Daily Wire that's written by Ryan Saavedra that talks about this, and he titles it, America's Far Left Silent as Cubans Cry Out for Freedom from Communist Dictatorship. Top far left figures in American politics were silent on Sunday as Cubans took to the streets crying out for freedom from the nation's communist dictatorship. Videos circulate on social media of Cubans marching in the streets protesting the impoverished conditions of the island and their lack of freedom under the far-left communist regime. They did so while chanting liberty and freedom and waving an American flag. Boy, that sounds a lot different than what the media was pushing by saying, oh, well, they're just going out there protesting against COVID-19. Well, it seems a lot to do with their crackdown on their government, their oppressive government that has been oppressing them for the last, 6 decades at least. The communist dictatorship later started cracking down on protests, allegedly inflicting violence on unarmed protesters and cutting off internet access. Wasn't that just lovely? Notable far-left figures that did not weigh in on the matter by the time this report was filed included Bernie Sanders and AOC, who was described in 2016 by Tom Perez, then chairman of the Democratic Party, as the future of the Democratic Party. Isn't that nuts that there was people out there in 2016 that were touting that kind of stuff, that AOC was going to be the future of the Democratic Party? I mean, everybody's heard her speak. Everybody's heard of her outlandish things like the Green New Deal, and she was going to be the future. That shows how far left the Democratic Party has moved from being somewhat center here back in like JFK days to now where they are now, where she's going to be the freaking face. Yeah, right. Sanders has reportedly praised murderous communist dictators and regimes, including Cuba, as highlighted by Sanders' political opposition. It says here, Sanders vacationed in Cuba, which isn't that big of a deal, and has praised the Cuban Revolution, saying he was excited to watch Fidel Castro rising up against the ugly rich people. There's a big problem in that statement. Senator Sanders praised Communist Cuba's value system while he was mayor of Burlington and even visited Cuba to meet with the dictator in 1989. A lot of problems with that. Not so much meeting with the dictator, but the fact that you're constantly rising this dictator up for not just their value system, which is obviously complete trash in a communist regime, but also rising up against the ugly rich. I really don't get the whole idea that Bernie Sanders is going against the rich. The guy owns multiple houses. The guy is economically rich. I don't understand where the hell this whole hypocrisy is being unexposed to for the left. It's just mind-blowing to me. Sanders mocked reports on human rights abuses in Cuba, claiming that the reports of torture and executions were manufactured by Republicans. The Castro regime's human rights abuses are extensive and have been widely reported, including the sentencing of homosexuals and critics to forced labor camps and forcing more than 1 million Cubans to risk drowning as they fled to the country. But you can't talk about that type of stuff because remember, communism and socialism, it really works, folks. It actually works. Yet they can't name a place in the entire globe that it's ever worked in 100+ years. It's been tried over 100 times in the last 100 years and has failed miserably. It has led to millions upon millions of people dying. But they don't want to acknowledge that stuff because if you acknowledge it, then their whole idea, their whole worldview falls apart. AOC endorsed Sanders for president in 2020 when he ran as a Democrat for the second time and subsequently lost again. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe it's your ideas, man. While on the same campaign trail, AOC displayed a cultish-like obsession for Sanders, saying she did not recognize her inherent value as a human being until she heard of Sanders. Boy, there's a lot of problems with that if you don't recognize your inherent value before hearing Bernie Sanders speak, there's probably a lot more going on behind the curtain than meets the eye. The Washington Post reported the director of Human Rights Watch's American Division said his group had received reports that at least 20 people had been arrested. He added that the organization had received reports of violence being used by Cuban forces, a claim echoed by social media users sharing videos of wounded protesters. And when your government cuts out the internet, when the government stops people from reporting on things, there's a lot of oppressive stuff happening behind the scenes. There's a lot of stuff that government wants to do to its own people that they don't want getting out to other countries because they know they're going to have a massive human rights violation on their hands, whether that's from the UN, which we know doesn't do crap, or that's coming from the United States, Australia, Britain, things like that are actually going to do something about it and is going to step in to help these people out because they're being destroyed by their own government. And we need to be there to support them and help them, which is why you have senators like Marco Rubio and other congressmen and congresswomen standing up to the plate, trying to push legislation or at least policy out there that's going to support these protesters so that they can have some aid, so they can have some help in going against their government, their oppressive regime over there. But that is the update we have on what's going on with Cuba over here. You have our far left Americans, Bernie Sanders, AOC, that are completely silent about this stuff, not speaking out against Cuba. They're only there to support it. And when things don't work, they're not there to talk about it. They're only there to pretend like socialism works as well. And then you also have journalists there getting just bludgeoned right in the face and other places of their body, just being beaten in the streets for just reporting on something that needs to get out to the people and needs to get out to the world. It's absolutely disgusting stuff. I'll try to continue to report on this stuff, keep you guys updated on what is going on in Cuba. Please make sure you like and subscribe to this video, and I'll see you a little bit later here on The Bald Brad Show.